Are you considering moving to Boise, Idaho? Living in Boise and its surrounding Treasure Valley might be just what you are looking for. Then again, maybe not. In today's video, I'm going to go over why people who move here from out of state sometimes find themselves moving right back. In this video, I'm going to be specifically talking about people who have moved here from Oregon. Most of the points and issues that send people bouncing right back also apply to those who have moved here from other neighboring states, such as California or Washington. So why do people, after taking all of that time to move here, they've done their research, they've gone through the whole moving process, they've found new jobs, gotten their kids enrolled into schools, they've done it all, and then then they find themselves thinking, no, Idaho is not for me. We don't want you to find yourself in that situation. So let's break down why it sometimes happens and what you need to know to be sure it doesn't happen to you. We have zero interest in having you move to Idaho only to find that, the state of Idaho just isn't the right one for you. So let's break it down right now. Hey there, I'm Marcie Ellison, a local real estate agent right here in the Boise, Idaho area. And if this is your first time visiting our channel and you're looking to learn more about both Boise and then also all of the surrounding cities and areas that really work together to make the Treasure Valley the place it is, then you've come to the right place. Our goal with this channel is to provide you with candid, on-the-ground videos that would have really helped us 15 years ago when we were first contemplating moving here. To help us stay in touch and to keep just learning all about our booming area right alongside us, please take a quick second to just hit that like and subscribe button. Okay, now let's break these down. First up, and this one actually typically surprises people on both sides of the political fence. Let's talk about cultural differences and, politics.
Politics, 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 politics.
If you line up both Idaho and Oregon's political landscapes, flat out, they are pretty darn different. Similar to California and Washington, Oregon is a liberal, Democratic-leaning state, whereas Idaho definitely leans in the other direction. Now, for those of you who are watching this and are familiar with my roots in my hometown, I was born and raised in Eastern Oregon, which is certainly not at all Portlandia and has, pretty much a completely different vibe than Portland's more progressive and liberal feel. But the bulk of the population for the state of Oregon is tucked into the northwest section of the state, right in the Portland area. And that section is primarily quite blue, whereas Idaho is not. If seeing a big old truck flying a Trump flag with Trump 2024 and Go Brandon stickers just plastered all over it, if that is going to bother you,
eat my dust, Donald Trump.
Well, then brace yourself, because living in the Boise area means you will, probably on an almost daily basis, see one, if not several. On the flip side, one interesting thing to note here is that the city of Boise is actually, along with Haley and Moscow, one of the most liberal-leaning cities in the state of Idaho.
Seriously?
Yes, seriously.
So for some who might be moving to the area because maybe you're looking to be in an area with more conservative, Republican-leaning values, you might find yourself a little surprised to discover that the city of Boise isn't quite as conservative as you might have thought. In a way, it's sort of like the inverse of what I was just talking about in regards to the differences between Eastern Oregon and the northwest section of the state centered around Portland. So just know that on both ends, we've known people who've arrived only to find themselves bouncing right back because they aren't thrilled by what they find. And again, we've seen that happen with both Democrats and Republicans. Now, let's talk about Idaho's location and its proximity to the ocean. Idaho, unlike Oregon, California, or Washington, Idaho is landlocked. If heading to the coast for a weekend getaway on a whim is something that you love, living in Idaho will mean that you will not be able to just jump up and go get your fill of the amazing Pacific. Not anyhow without a bit of planning and added travel time. My family and I now typically visit the Oregon coast once a year, and it's a trip that we plan out well ahead of time because one, we have a large extended family who meet us there, and we all have dogs, so finding big pet-friendly rental homes close to each other really requires some planning. But really the main reason is because we now have to plan a full day of travel on both ends of the trip. When we lived in Oregon during college, my then boyfriend, now husband Andy, and I absolutely loved that we could be in Cannon Beach or Newport in just a couple of hours. We could just head out on a whim on Friday afternoon and be right on the beach in time to catch the sunset. Living in Idaho, that means you can't do that as easily anymore. We have definitely known people who've arrived in the Boise area thinking, I drive an 8-hour road trip to the Oregon coast. Will that really bother me? And then they discover that, yeah, it really does bother them and they miss the ocean. So for this one, I would just encourage you to take a beat and really think about how important it is for you to get that breath of fresh ocean air, and if you're gonna be okay with doing it just a couple times a year, or if you'd really prefer to do it a couple times a month. Okay, now let's talk about open carry. Open carry is legal in Idaho, and a concealed weapons license is not required to carry, nor is it required for long guns, concealed or not. And this is something that can completely throw people. Being at a park with your kids, or grabbing lunch at the village, or cruising through the produce aisle in Albertsons, in all of these places, you could potentially see someone with a gun right on their hip. And that might not be something that you like. And it might just have you thinking, yeah, don't want to be in Idaho.
Why do you have a gun? Why does he have a gun?
Now, is the average Boise resident walking around with a gun attached to their hip? Certainly not. But would it be safe to assume that there are a number of people carrying around you when you are checking out at Winco or Target? I'd say definitely. The last thing I will point out regarding this hot button issue, which obviously brings up the issue of safety, if you do your research, you will find that Boise, as well as the whole state of Idaho, when compared to the national average, and certainly to the state of Oregon, it ranks as a much safer place to live. If you are interested in learning more, we will put links to a couple of great resources for you to check out in the video description. In a nutshell though, Boise and the whole Gem State, which is again an open carry state, it's one of the safest. So that's just a little food for thought. Now let's talk about the weather and climate. Here in Idaho, we definitely experience all 4 seasons. If you are contemplating leaving here from the Portland area, while we certainly don't get anywhere near as much rain as you do in Portland, we do get more snow, and winters can feel pretty darn long in comparison. For some who initially don't think that the winters will bother them, some of them sometimes find that period between January 3rd or 4th, so right after the holidays and right through the very beginning of March, it can be rather gloomy. In that time frame, we typically don't actually see as much snow down in the ground and in the valley that people think we're going to, but it remains cold, frigid, and just kind of bleh.
Really gloomy. Like Joy Division gloomy?
It's also during this period that we see inversions. If you aren't familiar with inversions, they happen when the air mass gets flipped upside down and temperatures in higher elevations basically stay warmer than they should. And that blanket sort of encases and just keeps smog and pollution and all the things that we don't really want to be breathing right in the valley. So again, it's basically like a blanket of dense fog and coldness just encases the valley.
It's cold outside.
On the plus side, they don't happen every single year, and when they do, they typically only last a week or 2. Just know that living in Boise, Idaho will mean you will experience all 4 seasons, and sometimes there will be extremes. And those extremes, so crazy hot summers and frigidly cold and bleary winters, yeah, that might not be your cup of tea, and that's okay. Okay, so now let's talk about jobs and employment. While Boise's job market tends to be very strong and our unemployment rate is consistently well below the national average, we have seen an uptick in people bouncing out of the area due to employment issues. So many people moved to the area during the pandemic, and they brought their remote work from home jobs along with them. But then once they got here and settled in, and then the pandemic driven rules and regulations that were in place in the states that they fled were lifted, well, for some, unfortunately, so did their option to continue to work remotely.
That changes things.
Thus, we've seen people who are moving back and have moved back just because they can't keep their once remote jobs. So unfortunately, yes, this isn't always exactly what people want to do, but well, for all of us, income does matter. And unfortunately, the average wage and salary in Idaho is typically a bit lower than what you find in Oregon and certainly other surrounding states such as California. So please be sure that you have a solid handle on both the employment options here as well as the benefits that do or perhaps don't come along with them. Now, let's talk about housing costs. While the Boise area used to be widely nationally regarded as having such affordable housing and also so many housing options to boot, well, yeah, that's just simply not the case anymore. With higher interest rates, incredibly low inventory. So by inventory, I'm referring to how many homes are available on the market for people to buy. Add those to the relatively high average sales price of homes in the area. And yeah, if anything, Boise's housing market is now sometimes a deterrent for people. Flat out, this is a weird time and for some, a rather difficult time to buy. So yes, here I am as a realtor telling you that our current real estate market is a bit off the rails, but well, it's the truth, and that's why you're watching this video, right?
Yeah, what's the truth?
On the flip side, thankfully, the change and shift that we are seeing in the market, one that is well overdue, is one that I believe will eventually lead to a more stable and reasonable market. One in which both first-time homebuyers and downsizing retirees, as well as single-income growing families, can find their fit. Unfortunately, there have been people who have moved here from out of state who thought, I'll just rent for a year until home prices come down, and then found themselves signing another year lease, and then another one. And then ultimately, when home prices never came down as much as they were hoping, found themselves just throwing their hands up and packing up to move out. Because yes, while we are seeing home prices tick downward a tad, home values remain incredibly high. And while this is great for pre-existing homeowners, it can obviously be quite challenging for hopeful buyers. That all said, depending on when you are watching this video, the market will have continued to change. It's a fluid market. So shoot us an email, give us a call. We'd be happy to give you an up-to-the-minute look at exactly what's happening in our market right now. Okay, so now let's talk about taxes. Now, while Idaho generally has lower income and property taxes compared to Oregon, Oregon has no sales tax. And paying 6% every single time you check out of the grocery store, which for me, with two rambunctious growing boys, is a lot. So that 6% tax burden adds up. So for some, sales tax alone can be the straw that breaks the camel's back. On this note though, I am often surprised to talk with people about taxes.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
Before I go further though, I should hit pause here because I am by no means a CPA, not even close. I know just enough to be dangerous. But I have had several conversations over the past several years with people regarding issues and really just general confusion regarding Idaho taxes, especially if they are impacting their decision to move out of state. So before you make any big decisions based on taxes, I would definitely advise you to touch base with an experienced financial advisor or tax professional who can provide you tailored advice based on your specific circumstances and situation. Now, let's talk about Boise's infrastructure and public transportation. If you're moving from a larger metro area, so for this video, let's compare it to what you'll find in Portland, Hillsboro, or Eugene. Boise's public transport system is, well, not exactly extensive. Reliance on private vehicles is typically deemed to be pretty necessary for commuting. While Boise is incredibly walker and biker friendly, yeah, if you don't have or want to have a vehicle, that will prove to be difficult rather quickly.
Our public transportation stinks.
That all said, across Ada County, there has been a lot of talk, both by politicians, advocates, and just regular residents regarding trains, more buses, and just really expanding our current public transportation system. But if you are coming from a place that allows you to really rely heavily on public transport, and that's something you will either need or just that you simply want to continue to be able to rely on when you get here, then you might be disappointed and find yourself moving out. And now, the last reason you might find yourself moving out of Boise, Idaho, it's growth. Increasingly, we have seen an uptick in people contemplating moving out of the area due largely to just how big and just how fast it exploded.
We weren't ready.
Some feel disappointed by what they see and feel has been sluggish city planning.
Okay, so we are way behind.
People have voiced their frustration about the city just not keeping pace with the population surge. Straight out, our roads weren't ready, and neither were many public resources such as schools. We are currently playing a game of catch up. And for some, the constant construction and traffic is a bit frustrating. We were recently visiting with a family whose son plays on my kiddo's soccer team. They told us that they've grown increasingly worried that Boise is slowly going to become just like the city they moved here from, and they came from Tualatin, Oregon, which you may or may not know, Tualatin is a Portland suburb. This one shocked me, and honestly, I still, if the family watches this, they know that I love them, but I don't fully still completely agree with their prediction, like at all. But it's their concern, and it has them contemplating actually moving their family back.
We're leaving.
Back to a city that, quote unquote, they couldn't get away from fast enough just 2 years ago. I should point out that they also have a lot of family in Tualatin, so that's an obvious pull for them. But the perspective that Boise is slowly morphing into a different type of place altogether, a city like Tualatin, Personally, I don't see that, and that's definitely not my experience. But again, it is their perspective and might very well be the reason that they ultimately find themselves moving back. So it's worth sharing. I hope you found this video helpful. My husband Andy and I, we receive phone calls, texts, and emails from people just like you every single day. People who are just looking to wrap their head around Boise and the surrounding area and really assess whether or not it would be a good spot for them. If you would like to connect, please don't hesitate. You can give us a call or shoot us a text at 208-598-3040, or you can shoot us an email. We'd just love to be here and to be your boots on the ground. Have a great day.